So in this movie, we're going to talk about importing text and dealing with text. We're going to begin by importing a text file using the text import wizard, and then we're going to apply that same functionality in a different way with a different command option, the text to columns, where we can parse out text data that's already in our workbook. So I've got a blank worksheet, and we're going to import some data into this worksheet using a text file. The text file specifically we're going to use is one that's available in your practice files. So first we're going to go to the Data tab, and then we're going to left-click in the Get External Data group from Text. Go to the place, if you have to, where you have stored your practice files and select the NYSE_2012-0803, New York Stock Exchange, August 3rd, and then left-click Import. And you'll be taken to the Text Import Wizard dialog box, step 1 of 3. Now, a text file comes in one of two varieties. It's either going to be delimited or it's going to be a fixed width. I'm going to first select the radio button for fixed width. This is not a fixed width text file, but I want to show you what you can do if it is. You'll get this little scale in the center of the dialog box that you can click on and insert these lines of demarcation that separate one field value from another, which you can then also select and move if necessary. Now, if this was a fixed width file, when we came to this screen, step 2 of 3, you would see these demarcations automatically inserted. But since this is a delimited file, you don't see those at all, but it doesn't prevent you from being able to insert them. So I'm going to go back, and this time left-click Delimited, because this is a delimited file. It's a comma delimited file. How do I know that? I know that because I can see the commas. And this is a common format for text files, a CSV, a comma-separated value file. The other formats are TXT and PRN. So the CSV, the comma-separated value, or the comma-delimited file, is the common way that you'll get your text information in a file. So I've selected delimited. I'm going to left-click Next. And now I have to tell Excel in step 2, how is it delimited? Is it delimited by a tab? Well, no, we already established it was delimited by a comma. So I'm going to left-click comma, and those separators are automatically inserted, and it parses out the data every place there was a comma in the data. I'm going to deselect that. First, we see the commas, and every place there is a comma, we then get a separator to separate those data fields. You can have several separators if you want. I'm going to clear the tab choice. The other ones are you can see semicolon and a space. And if you have a delimiter that's not one of those four, it's some other character, you can establish that delimiter as well. You can also treat consecutive delimiters as one delimiter. Going to step 3, I now have some more detail level control over how the data is going to be imported into Excel. In the data preview part of the dialog box, the top line shows general in all cases. That is a rule that's being applied by Excel to determine what type of data that the fields are going to be imported as. It says general converts numeric values to numbers, date values to dates, and all remaining values to text. Usually that's what you want. Sometimes you'll get numbers that you don't want to import as numbers, you would rather import them as text. For instance, a zip code field. You're not going to perform any mathematical calculations on a zip code, so it would be better really to import zip codes as text. So you can select a field, left-click the data type you want that field to be, and in the case of dates, depending upon how the data is displayed in the field, will then determine how you tell Excel that date is displayed. The dates can be displayed in any one of these 6 permutations, beginning with month, day, year, then day, month, year, and so on. So this enables you to have Excel identify where the year is, where the day is, and where the month is in the field, and in what sequence those elements of the date are arranged. And you also have the ability to have Excel skip the field altogether and not import the field. And again, this is field specific, so we can set each one of these settings up differently for the different fields. I'm going to select General because that's fine with me. And we have two more options that we can establish in the Advanced Text Import Settings dialog box. The first is to determine how the numbers are separated. In the United States, we use commas as thousand separators, but in the UK, they use a period as a thousand separator. And in the United States, we use a period as a decimal separator, they use a comma. So it's kind of flip-flop. So depending upon where you're getting your data from, this option will allow you to determine what separators are applied in the numeric fields. The last setting that we can control is trailing minuses for negative numbers. Every once in a while, you'll have a negative number displayed in a text file with a trailing minus sign. If you import that, it's going to import it as a text field. With this option selected, you can import that field as a value field, and it'll come in as a negative number. I'm going to left-click OK, and we're done setting this up. I'm going to left-click Finish. And the last decision we have to make is, do we want it, one, in an existing worksheet, and if so, where, or in a new worksheet? And since we went through all the trouble of setting all this up, we can left-click Properties and name the query, save the query definition. We have some refresh control, which the default for the first choice is to prompt for file name on refresh. Excel will prompt you with this choice selected for the name of the file on the refresh, whether you are refreshing it manually or you're establishing an interval to have it automatically be refreshed, or you're setting it up so the data will be refreshed when you open the file. You also have the ability to remove the external data from the worksheet before you close the worksheet. So why would you want it to prompt you for a name every time you refresh? You may not want to. If the file you're refreshing has the same name, and let's say your server at your place of work has a file out there that's created every day that's called sales.txt, and the name of the file never changes, well, then you would want to clear this if you wanted to either automatically refresh it or have some manual control over the refresh of the data. If instead the server puts a file out there that has sales and then designates the date, and so the file name changes every day, you would want to select that checkbox so that you can rename the file that Excel's looking for when you're refreshing the data. Excel will automatically adjust the column widths on the refresh unless you clear that checkbox. And the last, very useful at times, depending on your needs, option is this one: fill down formulas and columns adjacent to data. When the data is refreshed, if you have columns to the right side of the data that contains formulas, those formulas will automatically be copied down if the data extends beyond the point where those formulas resided before you did the refresh. So many times you can establish formulas that are driving off of the data, and if the data and the length of the data changes on the refresh, those formulas will automatically be copied down. That can be fairly convenient. So I'm going to left-click OK. We're going to take the data into the existing worksheet. Left-click OK, and there's my data. Left-clicking off of the data, I now have a connection that I can manage. We're going to go into that in another movie. And when I select the data, I have the ability to go in and change the properties, which has to do with the name of the query, the refresh control, and some of the other options we just talked about. Closing that and left-clicking in an area that's outside of the data, the Properties command button is now grayed out. So we use the Text Import Wizard to import a text file. If we want to get rid of the data, I'm going to select it, Control-A, and then press Delete. Excel will ask us if we want to just delete the data, or do we want to delete the data and the query. I'm going to delete both by selecting Yes. Now when I go back to Connections, I don't have one because I just deleted it. So I copied that exact same text file information into the workbook without using the Text Import Wizard to show you that we have access to the same functionality, only it's called the Text to Columns functionality. I'm going to left-click on that range, Control-A to select the whole region that contains the data, And although it looks like the data extends into other columns, it actually doesn't. It's all contained in column A. And I can double-click column A to show you that more clearly. So we're going to go to the Data tab and left-click in the Data Tools, Text to Columns. That should look familiar. We know we can treat this as delimited data. Click Next. The data fields are separated by a comma. We don't really have to change any of the other settings to identify which fields that we want to keep or not, or changing and converting date fields, changing what otherwise might be value fields to text fields, and the advanced options don't apply either. The settings for the numeric decimal separator and thousand separator, and we don't have any trailing minuses for negative numbers. And that's selected because I checked it during the last time we had the dialog box opened. So Excel will remember your decision for that particular option setting. I'm going to clear that box, left-click OK, and then left-click Finish, and I get, double-clicking to close that column a little bit, the exact results that I got the first time. So the text import wizard is good for pulling in text files into your worksheet. But if you already have the text in your worksheet and you want to separate it into different columns, you can use the Text to Columns functionality in the Data Tools group on the Data tab. So that's importing text into your worksheet. We selected a text file and used the Text Import Wizard to import that text file. And we established all the settings in 3 steps. We established whether the file was a delimited file or a fixed width file. Once we established that, we either parse the fixed width file or we establish what the delimiter is. In this case, it was a comma. And then in step 3, we can choose to import the columns or not and establish what data type we want to import each of the columns as. And then we found if the text is already in the workbook, we can use the Text to Columns functionality in the Data Tools on the Data tab to do exactly the same thing, to parse out the data and to separate it into different columns so we can actually utilize it in the tabular format that Excel needs to have the data in.